stop after me, you know, so we were mates, you know, like, and we went to school, but, you know, he was younger than me, and he cops that whole attitude, and he doesn't throw it on John, but I absolutely have read where John had said that many times.
Well,
you know?
I was sort of bringing it up the way that, you know, John never lets you forget the pecking order, and he was copying the fact that it took him years to just sort of like. It
almost pained him to say, like, he critiques George's early songwriting too. He just like, and he didn't say it in that, or seemingly, he didn't seem to say it in that John Lennon vindictive way. It was more like, almost like he felt sorry for him. He's just like, you know, it was embarrassing when George would actually come in with a song, because they weren't good, you know, and we were doing this other stuff. And he's just like, and when George would come in with stuff, I was just like, oh my God. And that's early on. And I don't know if that's even retrospective, because he did cop out of a lot of George's recordings. Like, he just wouldn't play on them. He'd be like, you know, when they got. But that could also just be a reaction to Paul McCartney too. You know what? I'm not loving like, I got to play on Obla Di Obla Da, you know. So I'm not playing on I Me Mine, you know, like whatever. I don't know, you know, who knows? Like, that he was like, just like, I'm not playing on any of this crap. And it sounds like it's more of a slight to George, but really it's more, well, I'm not playing on any of it except for my stuff.
Yeah, my stuff. Yeah.
There were some great tidbits here. I just want to read them real quick about our friend Billy Preston here. He was a child prodigy, entirely self-taught, and never had a music lesson. He's 16 years old when he meets the Beatles playing with Little Richard.
Yeah,
they meet him
really
in Hamburg. That's amazing. That's pretty impressive. And he's getting in the same year as the Foo Fighters? Come on!
Well, that's the thing is, I don't know. Yeah, it's a.
Dave Grohl played Nirvana. Let's not forget that.
I know, and he's inducted under Nirvana.
He gets that, and you know what? I've never like. There are certain things I hear. It's like, oh, that's Dave Grohl playing the drums with Queens of the Stone Age, and you know what?
He's a phenomenal.
Kicks ass,
it does.
You know?
It does. But so give me this. Okay, so. Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters are to Nirvana like Paul McCartney and Wings is to Beatles.
Who's Linda McCartney in this operation, in this scenario? Pat Smear?
You don't need a Linda in there.
I know. He's actually the one that gives him a legitimacy.
But what about like, okay, does George gets in because he's Beatles plus All Things Must Pass, right? So he gets in as question is Ringo in as the solo artist?
He is. Yeah. Oh yeah. That did come up in something I read. Yep.
Sir Ringo to you.
Yes, sir, Chris. But I mean, he had hits. Like, you know what I mean? He
didn't write the hits, but I mean, he gets in. If Carole King gets in off of Tapestry, Ringo gets in off of Ringo, because Ringo's a great record.
Yeah, but I look. But if you go like, there's it's like every single successful album of all time. Then that artist should be like Gilbert O'Sullivan, who had. Alone.
He's probably in the songwriters,
right?
You got to separate songwriters. Songwriting helps, and there's a separate songwriter category.
Then Ringo gets in. I mean,
he's in.
No.
How many? Right, as a solo guy, he gets in
because of the Beatles.
Oh my mind!
Because of the Beatles. Come on, let's be real.
Separate Ringo from
Neil
the
Peart
Beatles
is not.
That's a moot point.
Neil Peart is not going in as a solo.
But I still think like his singles are
burning with Buddy.
His early singles are great. We heard them because we heard them on the radio, and you were just like, and I didn't even think of it, but it's Beatle Ringo. Like, I either liked the tune or I didn't. Like the same way I didn't like, but it was a few years later. But when starting over came on, I was shatteringly disappointed. When I heard it, I was like, "Oh my God!"
But
I guess just talking about that visceral level. You're just sitting, you're hearing it for the very first time, and you're like, "It's the new John." And I was just like, it was crushingly underwhelming.
But I know. But if you took the Beatles away, I don't know if any of the four solo acts would get in. right?
Wings is in.
Paul McCartney.
It's Live and Let Die. Like I was listening to Live and Let Die the other day.
Okay, then
and
Whitney
Paul
Houston
McCartney does this unbelievably great.
Guys, don't talk over each other.
There's no doubt Whitney Houston totally should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Absolutely, all those hits. You know what I mean? I don't know how you come up with a consistency of who to put in and who put not.
Because it's still rock and roll.
So, holy fuck! How is Vanilla Ice not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? You know,
because he had one hit.
MC Hammer, but it sold 10 million copies.
Yeah,
if he was in a famous band previously, maybe that would be the
case. If the quantifying of that is subjective, then you're just being somewhat obtuse anyway. I mean, it's not like we're not. I know you know. Like there's a difference between that.
I'm checking. Is NWA in? Is Public Enemy in?
Quantified?
NW. The hip hop acts are Public Enemy, NWA, Run DMC, LL Cool J.
Okay, LL Cool J is up for an award in here.
Actually, maybe this is the year he got in.
Well, no, he's getting one of those specialty awards. I just had it up.
What about? But who is there? I think Grandmaster Flash maybe is in, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're like a special.
How
like
can
Grandmaster
you not put John Lennon in for Instant Karma? How can you not put it in for Cold? Like Cold Turkey's not great, but it's just like
Chris, he's in. You're having a different conversation. That it's not. I'm saying
you just said to me before. Would any of them got in if it wasn't for the fact that they were in the Beatles? Do they have any other merit? Then I'm like, man, that's a lot of singles. They're like, boy, I really enjoy a lot of John Lennon stuff.
But are the singles? See, but that's the thing is, I think that you can't detach them because you wouldn't probably those songs would be like obscure underground songs that didn't break through if they didn't have the platform of the Beatles.
Tupac Shakur is in.
It was a really good record, right? It's like how come you could because to me, right, that was always the challenge is that they took forever to put in the Velvet Underground because they didn't sell a lot of records and no one really liked them at the time. But you know, it was like, but it was just an overwhelming demand. It's like they're never going to put in Big Star. But that's like a friggin' perfect record, you know. There's so much, so that's what it becomes really. They had to twist arms to get Todd Rundgren.
That'll happen at some point because of Alex Chilton. I think that touchdown to the box tops thing.
They'll run right.
Will be a big help for him.
This is my point, John. They'll run out of artists.
No, the window came and went. Right, that's the thing is.
When was the window? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wasn't around when the Replacements were writing songs about him.
No, when he died.
Oh,
right. There was and when they started,
they put people in posthumously all the time, don't they?
Sure.
Yes, but
somebody's got to lobby for it.
So there's the profile, right? So it becomes so. You essentially start lobbying and stuff, right? So so probably part of the lobbying to get the Go-Go's in is we're working on this documentary. We're going around interviewing all these people. So now the Go-Go's is on everybody's lips, no pun intended.
God.
You know what I mean? It's the same way people get Grammys, and it's the same.
Like all of our original notions hold true. Then it's just a sham, and it's like, why are we arguing about this?
Yes, it is.
Like there's nothing to argue about. It's a sham.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And there's the concept that we want to embrace, right? Is the fact is we think there should be and to me it's like the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Only because they created it do I even have this sort of who would I put in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
You're right. You're right.
You know,
because remember they didn't think of it until whatever the 80s, and at the time we all groaned.
There's only 7 hip hop acts in there. Run DMC, BC Boys, Public Enemy, NWA, Tupac. The Notorious B.I.G. is not in. He's not in.
But I'm saying, but they made but there was a big stink of okay, there's no doubt that a hip hop artist is not rock and roll, and then they go, well, with the energy of rock and roll, Run DMC, and you know.
But I don't want to I feel like we're belaboring that point, and I'm not I guess I didn't mean it in the literal sense that way, because does it kick ass? Does it have the rock and roll spirit? When we all first heard any of that stuff, Public Enemy and stuff like that, why did it appeal to you? It might be for several reasons, but one of them was definitely that these guys, it was punk rock for black guys. I mean, they were pissed off.
Black Flag will never be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's a crime, right? I mean,
start lobbying for it.
Punk rock is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The only thing is right. It's okay,
Ramones
the class
are in.
the Sex Pistols, the Ramones. Yeah, but I'm saying, it's sort of, it's almost
American hardcore. They're not ready for that yet. Do I think they'll never get in? Like the Dead Kennedys are just like in their own way. I don't know if they're as quote important as Black Flag, but I mean, they're so. The Dead Kennedys did a lot, that's a flagship band right there.
Yeah,
and they should be in, but they'll never get in because I think that, the Butthole Surfers should be able to get in. But people will never be able to take that name.
How much you can't? Punk rock was just this passing fad, and Green Day's in, so you got punk rock in there,
right?
Well, that's literally going to be the argument, right?
Yeah, but it's got to be better punk rock. Like the Buzzcocks aren't in, and Green Day's in.
They never, Buzzcocks never got anywhere near a nomination. You know what I mean? It was like that's the world we live in, right? So
there would be no Green Day if there was if the Buzzcocks didn't exist.
Exactly. So that's where I say it comes back. The voting is generational because the people who put in, the people from the 70s, they're the ones that go, you know what? But we got to put in the Platters because there wouldn't be they understand and they know the behind the music that they love, right? Whereas they're like, oh yeah, Green Day and those bands are like, they're important because my kids were really into them, but they didn't. Their touchstone wasn't the punk rock that made it. Like they read enough stories about the Ramones and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like they made fun of the Ramones.
Do we know if somebody like Willie Dixon is in?
Yeah, Willie Dixon definitely is.
I think Willie Dixon is in.
All right.
But the whole thing, though, is it's the generation that knows they know the history of their generation of music.
Right.
But they don't most of the people that are voting and doing stuff. Well, I guess at this point, even though they're starting to fade away, and it might be a weird skip of a generation that. That we miss sort of ours in that, but they know that Willie Dixon, Chuck Berry, Beatles, Stones, and then they know that lineage. But then punk rock to them is, these are the people that said Fleetwood Mac sucked, and Rod Stewart was going, so. But eventually, you're a long time for that to come back.
And punk rock to them is the Ramones. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? Okay. You're right, John. We put the Ramones in, right? Even guys that I play with, in this, a band that I was playing with once a year, this Dad's Night band. If you told them that you liked punk rock, and these are guys that, some of them were up to 15 years younger than me and stuff like that, they'd be like, "Oh, you're a Ramones fan," and you're like, "Yeah, yup." I am, but right, but that's all they know. They didn't know anything about anything, and the rest of it is still, you're a freak.
Is it, Tony? Is Devo in?
I gotta Google it. If they're not,
I thought
that's an
about
injustice.
that before too, and I was kind of like, they have to be in. They have to be in.
I don't think they are.
And I also think Gary Newman should be in. He did have a hit song, but he's when you talk to Ethan about a guy like him, he's pioneering,
Wait,
goth
it's 2021.
Dude,
Kraftwerk is just getting in.
I know.
Think how much music. I don't.
They were nominees, but they. I
don't think Devo's ever gone in. What about?
That is a total injustice.
Daft Punk in? Right,
No way.
Daft Punk might get in. Right now that they've broken up and whatever, they're going to get credit for it's going to be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if actually Daft Punk got in, but probably not. I don't think they have. But there's going to be this constant rewriting of history that's going to go on. Because once again, so if Nirvana, but to a certain extent, right? So, we joke about it, but I bet you Dave Grohl's a voting member, right? And
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
So you
Billy
might
Joel
get
Armstrong. The longer this goes on,
now that the Foo Fighters in, Pat is also a voting member, right? So you now so you might get to now where that generation of oh God, I wish
Sonic Youth is going to be in within the next 5 years, guaranteed.
That wouldn't be a surprise because as I think about it now, it's the people from man. I wish I could have seen those bands in the 80s.
But Devo was a household name. I mean,
or Huskadoo, and I love those guys like that. They might, they'll turn into our age and have the power to put their idols in, kind of thing.
You're talking about.
It was so groundbreaking what they were doing too. It was totally it was hardcore, like Land Speed record and stuff like that.
But how many units did they ever move?